Week 3 is on structure, and I believe this is the last week for structure, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just... So we are on week 3, and yep, this is the last week for structure. So last week you already take a look at the videos, part 1, part 2. Yeah, where you actually learn about how to declare structure, which using struct, and then adding variables inside the struct, okay, as a members, or sometimes they call it elements, okay, and then assigning value, which you can actually initialize it, you know, with the curly brackets, things like that, or you can use scanf. All right. Accessing structure element or members or value is basically by using the dot operator, which is the full stop, the dot. Okay. Things like that. And then this week. So this week is basically you pass a structure to a function, you return a structure from a function. So what does 3.6 does is basically you create a struct and then you send the struct to a function. So whatever the function wants to do, whether it wants to edit the values, or does it want to collect values, or does it want to display values, yep, it's up to the function. Okay. And 3.7 is return a structure from a function. So this is what you can do is basically, you know, when you do the exercise that I told you yesterday, if you tried, if the question asks you that you have to display in a function and not in the main, so that is where what you do is basically you will send your structure to the function. Okay. And then declare and implement a nested structure. Okay, nested structure is basically to have a struct inside a struct, and it can also be called as grouping. So, okay, about examples related to the lecture slide, you can take a look at here for nested structure, for the entire structure examples. Okay, so slides are there, video are there. So this week you're supposed to complete up to part 5. So I'm not going to touch on that. So what I'm going to do for today is I'm going to use, let's see, switch my screen. All right. So what I'm going to do today is to do one of the example from the lab exercise 3, since yesterday we did not have any online session. So I asked you all to do the lab exercise 3. Okay. So in this exercise, we have 3 problem or 3 question. This is the number 1. Okay. So what you have to do is develop the application. Use array in your structure variable. This is not making the structure as array, but using array, which means char for this number, yeah, char for the project titles, things like that. All right. And then, yeah, get input from the user and then display. So this is how it's supposed to be. Okay, this is very simple. You don't need any functions whatsoever. So this is simple structure. Just follow the lecture slides and the videos. Okay. Second problem, it's you have to develop application. Same. The only different things is that there are 2 records to maintain. So standard array in your variable, which is the char array. Okay. User can key in. So it's actually a scanf. Display the record and output as this. Okay. The only different thing is that if you notice here, there is this group keyword here. Not sure if some of you guys can see. I'll try to zoom a little. Okay. So there is a group item, which means you'll have a struct extra which is struct birthday, and it will have the day, month, and year in the struct. But then the birthday struct will also fall under the struct newborn. So this is we call nested, which is, yes, nested structure. Okay, so their keywords are basically group. So this is standard. So this suppose you can do. Okay, so the third problem or the third question, okay, this is where you need to write an application for examination records. You need to take input from user. These are the information, and then display. But now you need to use function to display the data and not in the main function. And then you need another function to calculate total marks, and that one has to be displayed in the main function. Okay, so this one, it also involves nested. Okay, why? Because if you look at the question closely, it has subject is a group item. So yeah, there's the keyword group item. So sometimes they can tell you as nested, sometimes they can tell you as a group, or sometimes they can say a sub item. So yes, there's a lot of keywords, so you have to pay attention to it. So these variables or elements will be under the group or struct subjects, but then struct subjects will be under the struct results, examination results. Okay, so what I'm going to do is rather than going through the boring slides and the videos, that is something you can learn, I am going to solve this problem and show you guys how to actually do it step by step. So you can follow, or you can just view if you are using your phone or some other application. Yeah, while I show you the coding, you can screenshot if you want to. Okay, so let's start with this problem tree. So let me create exercise 3. Okay. Zoom in here so you guys can see clearly. Okay, so looking at this problem, let's take a look at the question. A school keeps a record of examination result for each student. Each contains the following data item or members or elements. Okay, it's the same. So we have student ID, student name, classroom, and subjects. So these are the elements. Subject is a group item. So what happens is that you will have this as a variable name, and then you will have this as a struct subjects inside the struct examination result. And then you have to create that struct subject outside and declare all of this. Or you can directly declare separate struct for each of these inside. Okay, so write an application to keep student examination records. In your program, user need to key in the student ID, student name, classroom, and subjects mark. Then the system will display all the entered data. Okay, so let's start. So struct, given your information, so we will declare on top here. Struct. So what should we name it? Because we say a record of examination results. So yeah, examination result. Let's see, examination, or should we use student data? Never mind, we stick with examination results. Okay, and then curly bracket, there will be a semicolon there. Okay, so what is required inside here? Student ID. So ID, because you have char with, I mean alphabets with numbers. So yeah, it has to be char. So char student ID. How many? Let's see. If you have CA, about 7. So never mind. Let's put 10. Okay, so we have student ID. Then we need the name. Char student name. This one we put a bit bigger array size because Yeah, some names are long, right? So student name and then classroom. Classroom what? We can have numbers, classroom 1, 2, 3, or we can have classroom with name. So let's assume standard school, they have classroom with name. So it's going to be char, classroom. Okay. I don't think it's going to be a long name, but then anyway, just keep it around 20 characters. Okay, and subject. So now, yes, part subject is a group item which consists of 4 main subject: Bahasa Melayu, Bahasa Inggeris, Mathematics, and Science. So we're going to keep it as struct because it's a group. Subjects. So, okay. So we know there'll be one new struct here, which is so much typo ni. Struct subjects. Okay. So before we decide this, we are still here. Okay, let's take a look. What it requires actually for the subject. You need to use a function to receive data, then total marks. So the subject is just going to store the marks. Yep, subject marks. So you're going to have subject marks. So marks are going to be, you can have point, right? So floating. So float marks. Okay, so we know for subject, you require is mark. But then of course, we have BM, BI, maths, and science. So are we going to declare a char with a name here? Yeah, you can. But then you're still going to create 4 listing here because you need 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it as marks, and I'm just going to declare 1 for BM. Okay. And then 1 for BI. And then what else? Maths. 1 for maths. And finally, going to declare science. Actually, in English it's SCIENS, but never mind, since they're naming it in Malay, so we'll just use that. We stick to the question, even though the question has spelling error. Okay. So now we have the struct for examination results. Let's see, ID, name, classroom, subjects, which we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, it's already in. And then this is a group, so it requires to store marks. So that's it for the struct. Okay, so we have done that part. Now, user need to key in. Okay, so now key in information is basically you printf and you scanf. So what we will do is basically do it in main. Yeah, we can reuse this. So let's keep this code. So you want to use this. So we have to declare. Right now, this is just a template. Okay, it doesn't work yet. You have to create an instance of it. So how to do that? Struct. Okay, use back the same name because we want to create for the student. So examination result. Then you put in the variable name. You can treat this something like, when you declare variable like char, integer, things like that. So just assume that this is the data type. Okay, a struct type with the data type examination results, like custom lah. Okay, now it comes your variable. So what do you want to call? I want to keep a record. So let me just call my info. Okay. So I just going to declare one copy, which is my info. This variable is going to have a struct type that will have all this information. But right now it's empty because we're going to get user to key in, right? Okay. So once we have done that, now we will get user to key in. Okay. What user need to key in? ID name. So let's start with new line. ID. So we get the user to key in ID, and then let's make the printf first. Okay, ignore about the scanf. We need what? ID, name, classroom, subject, mark. So subject mark you have 1, 2, 3, 4. So there is 7. 5, 6, 7. So first we get the ID, then we ask for the name. Yeah, I don't think we need new line lah. Yeah, no need. Because once scanf, it will automatically. Okay, ID. Then we need name. Then we get the classroom name. Let me just leave it as classroom lah, easier. Classroom, and then we have subjects. So subjects mark for VFBM, and we have BI, maths and science. Maybe ID. What did I miss? ID, name, classroom. Oh, okay. No. We use this. It's for the remaining subject. So BM, BI, then we have maths, and then we have science. Okay, so these are the input that we want user to key in. Okay, and then we will save it into our struct, which we already create a template. It's for examination results, but the variable that we're using is myinfo. Okay, so here we're going to make use of scanf. This is where we get the input from the user. So ID, it's going to be, let me just keep this. This is like a template. So what we're going to be here, it's a char, so string. Okay, I'm going to copy this. This is also going to be string. Classroom is also going to be string. Marks are going to be what we declare float. Okay, so it's going to be float. So marks is float. All right, we just copy paste for all the remaining subject marks. Okay, so ID. So where are we going to save? Okay, this is the part. If you are going to declare standard, like, char, name, things like it, what you will do is basically you will put name here, right? Okay, so when it comes to struct, what we're going to do is we will use this because this is our variable that we declared. So it's going to be myinfo. Okay, but that's the best part. Okay, when you put this, it will not know where to store for the ID because you are required to store inside this struct in the student ID. So this is where we come to the dot operator, and this is where it comes to the element or the members. So it's student ID, right? So we click this. So this one, you don't forget, ampersand is always there for scanf. So it will be stored in student ID. Okay. So for name, we will go for myinfo dot student name. Just double click this. Classroom, same. myinfo dot, where's classroom? Classroom, it's a char type. So yeah, string, correct. So subject marks, same. We're going to store in myinfo dot, what's the first one? BM. BM. Okay, now this is where the part that you have to remember. If you are using nested or group, or there is another struct inside the struct, okay, you have to remember to access the element of the struct. You can't just leave it as it is like this. So same as above, what you have to do is you just have to put another dot and automatically you'll get the member of this struct subject. Okay, so this is what we call nested. Okay, access first level struct and access second level struct. Okay, so same go for the others. myinfo. So this what? PI, okay, correct. And then marks. And again, this is for maths and marks. And then finally, this is for science dot marks. Okay. So now, as the question asks, key in student. So now we managed to ask the user to key in all this value. So of course, when you guys do, please remember to always build this, you know, to check for any errors. Okay. No, it's okay, ignore. Okay, always check for errors, or you can try to test run. In my case, yeah, I'll test run later. So we have done that. Write the application in your program. User needs to key in, so we get user to key in. But if you want to test, yep, you can always do a test run. CA12345, just a testing. This is my name. Classroom 1, 75.3, say 86.2, maybe 90, and 66. So process return 0, so there is no errors. Everything is fine. Okay. So that's on the input. Okay. Question says then system will display all the entered data. So this one is the data that I entered. But since I close it, it goes missing, right? So you need to use a function to display the data, not in the main function. So you need a separate function, okay, which is outside here. Because this is main. This belongs to main. We are not doing the. We need a separate one. And everything that you key in, you ask to be displayed at there. So let's see. We declare function prototype. As I taught you guys last week, the same. We want to display. Does the function return anything? No. So it's going to be void. And since I'm going to display, I'm just going to name it display. Okay. This is the standard function prototype. But here's a problem because I need to display all the entered data and this function doesn't have the data yet. But the data is in the main. So you know that in your function call, you need to send this. So what are you going to send? You can't be sending each of these separate variables. So you're going to send a struct of my info. So in our case, what happens is that what is the data type? If you're going to send an integer, we always put integer, right? If this is what you're going to send a value integer. But in our case now, we're going to send a struct. So if you put in the struct, and what struct are we going to send? Because we got a lot, we got subjects, we got this. So we're going to send examination struct. Okay. And then you can name your own variable. If you don't put it also it's fine, but I like to just keep it so that we can keep track. Okay. So it's a data that we're going to display. So yeah, I'm just going to name it data. Okay. So I'm going to copy this. Function prototype done. So we are going to go here to create our function body or function definition. Remove the semicolon. This is something you already learned in what we say? Programming technique. Yep. Okay. So what are we supposed to do here is we need to display all the entered data. So yeah, you know, it's just going to be printf, right? So let's copy this. Okay. I'm reusing code, Malas to type. Save some time. I don't need this scanf because I no longer need to take input from user. I just need to display. Okay. So I have to display the ID. Where am I going to display? Somewhere around here, which is going to be a string type. Name, I'm going to also display here. Classroom, I'm also going to display here. Subject marks. So because we are using float, right? So it's going to cause a long trailing numbers. So I want 2 decimal place of type float. Please say sometime. These are all float. Okay. But now, because this is just printf and there's no scanf, so it's pretty much going to put this in a straight line, but we don't want that. So, yep. Let's create a new line for all of this data. This is going to be your display. You can format up to you, up to your way of design. Okay. So all of this requires the variables to be sent. So, yep, we are going to put in the variables. Okay, how do we get these variables? Because we are sending it, there is a parameter. It's going to receive. How it's going to receive? Of course, we have to send. We haven't sent yet. So we have done function prototype. We have done function definition or function body. Now we're going to do the function call. So what are we going to do is we're going to call this function. Okay? Easiest way you can do is like this lah. I just copy paste. But you don't need to declare this anymore because you're inside main. And then you don't need to declare this anymore. You just have to send what do you want to send on your data. In our case, we're going to send my_info because we created this. This is our struct copy. We're just going to send my_info. Okay? Because all the details of the elements of the members are already in our special struct my_info. Okay, so we're just going to send this. So it's going to come here and be stored as data. So what does it mean? You are going to access from data. So data ID will be placed there. And then what name? Student name. So data name is going to go here. It's going to move from here to here. And then classroom. Classroom is going to go there. And this is our BM. But you can't leave it just like that because you have to send the detail because this is nested. Okay. Same goes to this. PI. Marks. Then what? Formats. Same. Also marks. Same goes to science. Science. Marks. Okay. So now this one will be able to display. That's the question now. Display all the entered data. So here you will get all the entered data. Okay. So, okay, if you want to make something nice, you can do this for beauty only. But examination results. Okay. And then I'm going to close it here. End of examination results. Okay. Let's see. No return because it's a void. Okay, now the function display, then create a function to calculate. Okay, let's test this first. So let's test ID CA12345 name. Okay, classroom. I'm just going to declare 1. Subject marks. Let's just test macam tadi lah. 80. 7.3. 65. And 95. So is it the same? Let's see. So this is the input. And when it calls the functions, it display the ID, the name, the classroom. And yes, it display the marks. And end of examination. Oh, kena new line kat sini. Alright, so keep the record separate. We keep more space. And we need one new line here to close. Okay. So coming to here, input done, display all the entered data. So you need to use the function to display, already done. Okay. Then create a function to calculate all the total marks. So what are we going to do is we're going to calculate these marks that we have inputted, just a total. So the total marks must be displayed in the main function. Okay, so they want the total marks to be displayed in here, but the calculation should be in a separate function. So let's create another function. Let's see. Display the cut main. So it has to return. It has to return. So return type of the function float. Calculate marks. All right. So float calculate marks. Do we need to send anything? Yes, because the marks are in this struct. It's in this struct. Okay. So it requires that. So we're going to do the same as the previous function. Also name it data. Don't worry, this one tak sama sebab it's a local variable nanti. So float calculate marks and we just have to send a struct. Okay, that's all. So function prototype there. We compile this here. So function definition. I'm going to copy this again. Okay, put it down. Remove the semicolon. And this is where you're going to get the struct. Okay, in this temporary variable. And then we want to calculate. So let's declare a variable float total. Okay. To be safe, initialize to 0. The value doesn't go messed up. Okay, so total equals to, we want to add up all, which is from what, BM, BI, maths, and science. So how do we access each of it? We are using back the keyword data from this. Okay. So what I require to do is I need to get BM, BI, maths, and science. So BM dot marks. So I need the marks information. So now we have for the BM. I'm going to add with BI dot marks, and then I'm going to add with maths dot marks. Because the question says just total lah, so you don't have to worry about the other thing. You just get the total. Okay, semicolon to end it. So what happens is that we have a total of this. So it will be safe in total, which is float, because this declaration for this struct is float. Okay, so once total is done, of course, because our function is float type, so it's going to return. So we have to return a value. So what are we going to return? We're going to return total. Okay, the total is going to follow this type, float. So function body done. So they say what? Calculate all the total marks, but display in the main function. So this one have to return. So we are coming back to here. So where's our function call? We have calculate marks. So we're going to call after this, we call calculate marks. And same as before, because we need to send the instance of our struct. Okay. So now we send it here. When we send here, it receives here, and then it does the calculation and it returns a total. So since it returns a total, it comes here and it has to be saved to somewhere because there's a return. So we tambah declaration, float, total. This variable is not same as the variable just now because it is local variable. Now they can return and it will be stored here. To be safe, always initialize it to 0. Okay. So now it's going to store here. And the final thing we want to do is we want to display. Let's reuse some code. So the total marks is .2f float type. And kat sini we don't use data anymore because we are in the main. Main is basically mine for. Right? But no. We don't need any more that. Kita tak store kat situ. We just put this. Silap. Okay. So total marks is total, which we receive from that function. Alright. So let's test our program. Like this. So let's run CA12345. This is a testing. Name classroom 1. Subject mark for BM. Let's assume 88. BI 78.3. Math 66.2. Science 25. Okay. So double check examination results. Okay, everything that we keyed is already there. End of examination results. Done. Total marks. This one we can use calculator lah untuk kira. So total marks is there. So this is what the answer for the problem 3 for student marks. Okay. So let's see. Look at the task. Have we completed all? Yes. Display main function. So done. So yeah, that's the answer. So do you guys have any question that you want to ask?
Sir.
Yep.
Dia kata subject is a group item. Jadi kena nested lah subject tu.
Yes, subject tu kena nested. So that is where subject akan jadi kat sini lah, which means subject is a group item. So group dia nested and this is the nested lah. So subject akan ada dia punya data sendiri. This is one way, but if you want you can do another way also, which is kat sini you can tambah if you want it to be nicer lah. Tambah char subject name, letak katakan 50 characters. Okay, what this allow you to do, contoh kat sini kan saya type terus macam ni kan, subject mark for science, maths, BI. If you take here, you can store the name of the subject dekat sini. So which means when you call for this one, you akan tukar just kepada macam ni. And then you can include this variable. So every time they display, dia akan ada own subject name. You can do that. And then here you can name for subject 1, 2, 3 and so forth. This is for number of subjects but without knowing what's the name lah. Tapi name kat sini. That is another way you can do lah. Other than that, sebab dia tak minta untuk key in subject punya nama kan. If it requires you to key in subject name, then you know automatically you have to store a subject name. Right now kat sini this is straightforward lah. So kalau complicated selalunya dia akan jadi macam tu lah. This you can be like A, B, C and D and so on lah. Ataupun you want to create array pun boleh. For saying about array, I'll show you guys one example in a while. So things like that. Okay.
Sir.
Welcome. Yes.
Satu lagi sir, yang kalau dalam question 2 dia ada cakap pasal sub item.
Mana question 2? Question 2.
Ada.
Okay. Group item with a sub item. Okay. Kalau dia bagi tahu sub item, contoh ni So we have a birthday group. Okay, let me show you guys. Kalau macam tu, the struct is birthday and sub item is day, month and year. So this is what they mean by sub item. Day. Day. Kita nak ambil words ke atau let's assume just as a number lah. So month. So use to sebab kita guna short form macam 01, 02 macam tu sampai 12. And then year. Year kita kena 4. So that's 4 digit. Okay. So this is what they meant by sub items. Which means they ask you that you need to have these items inside the struct birthday. Tapi dia kan ada main dia lah. Main dia ni dia panggil newborn record. Which awak akan ada struct untuk birthday dia lah.
Okay, sir.
Sama juga mother dengan father ni. Alright. Okay. If you guys know other question, I want to show you guys in terms of how to make it, how to say, contoh If you take a look at this previous example kan, dia ada, perasan tak? This is a repetition. 1, 2. Betul tak? So there is a 2 repetition. Exactly the same And then, if you look at question 1, put sama. It's a 2 different person. Tapi data sama. It has 3 data. Yeah. And also 3 data. 2 data separately but with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 information data kat sini. Okay. Which means, in this example that I show you, remember I create my info? So if you have 2, you can create double. So it can be my info 1, it can be my info 2. Okay. But my question is, takkan kita buat struct, kita buat data, takkan kita nak simpan 2 je kan? Of course kita nak simpan banyak. Contoh in our class right now, we have 51 people inside here right now. So I want to create a 51 copies. So if I'm going to copy paste this is going to be tiring lah, kan? And it's not friendly lah because it's not dynamic. So how can we do that? Okay, very simple. Kita buang semua ni dululah. So let's take a look. How are we going to do something like that? Which means kita nak buat struct that is dynamic. You can create number of records or copies. So I'm going to use example of struct student. Okay, I'll just use this basic example because you guys are familiar with the slides. So I'm going to use this struct student. Okay, we want to make multiple copies. But right now I don't want to complicate. So I'm just going to stay with one variable, which is name. Okay, kita nak kumpul name je. Or student ID, whatever that you think it's easy for you lah. Okay. So name 100 lah, characters assume banyak. Okay. So we're going to create, this is a template, struct student, that consists of their name. Okay. So we're going to create multiple records depending on the user. So now we have a copy and we know that we can create an array. So how do we do that? First, we want to ask dynamic can. So we ask from the user. First we ask from the user, how many records do you want to make? Okay. And then kita dapatkan input daripada user dulu. Okay. So what we're going to ask user? How many students? We're going to ask user how many students, and they're going to provide in decimal sebab kita main integer. They're going to provide n number of students. Okay, so we have to declare this variable integer n. Okay, so what happens here is that we're going to ask the user how many students. The user going to key a number, whatever number lah. Okay, say in my case, now in our class we have 50, 51, so we're going to put 50, right? So it's going to be the n. Then only I want to create the record or the copy. So what I do? After get the input from user, then I create struct student. Okay, remember earlier we have my info kan? Okay, what I want to do is that I want to create an array. So I'm still going to use the my info so that you guys are familiar with this. Okay, my info. Okay, so it's going to be an array. Tadi dia tak ada array, just a regular variable. So now I'm going to create an array because there is a list of students. Okay, but how many or how huge is the list is? Since we already asked from user, so we know. So we put the n there. So now you will create an array of struct. So if I key in 10, I will be able to copy or make 10 records of the student. Okay. So now's the big issue. Okay, kita ada 10. Now kita nak input untuk 10 kan? Okay. That is where you can use while loop or for loop, but I like to stick with for loop because it's a fixed number. We know how many times we are going to loop. So I'm just going to initialize integer I equals to 0. This is basic. So I want to start from 0. Array, you start with index 0. So 0. And then what's the condition for me to terminate? I is less than n. Sebab user yang bagi tahu. I don't know exactly how many. User might put 100. So I want to loop according to how many the user say. So I less than n. And then increment of I plus plus. So I know that I will be able to loop as many times as the number of students that the user key in. Okay. So once I do this, now I ask the user. Of course, kita kena bagi tahu kat user. Nanti user blur. So we put there. We put there. New line sebab there'll be a looping. Double lah new line. Okay. Name. Key in name for student. We have to tell us it's going to loop for we don't know berapa lama kan. So we want the user to know. Okay. Key in the name for student number ke berapa. Okay. So how do we know what number? We are going to loop I. I from 0 sampai maximum of n. So takkan kita kata student 0 kan. So of course you start with 1. So obviously you put I plus 1. Okay. So here we will inform key in the name for student sekian-sekian. Okay. And then this is where we will collect the input. So what type are we going to collect? Name kan? So string char. Okay. This is where the important part. You are going to store at -4. So tadi ingat tak? Kita -4 kita akan dot. Betul tak? Dan dot kita akan pergi pada this one. Name. Tapi sekarang kita tak boleh buat macam tu. Because it's an array. So we have to bring the array box. And then lepas array box tu baru kita dot. And kita bagi name. But which one? It's on the loop. I daripada 0 sampai n. So this is going to be I. Lupa. 9%. Auto tak keluar tu. Auto tu. Let's see. Keluar tak auto? Tak juga. Never mind. So we will scanf a type string. Okay. To myinfo. Pada location of the index kat sini. Okay. And store in the name. Alright. So this one will look. And then we will have a display. So let's test dulu. Oh, tak tutup tadi. Okay. So we run this. How many students? Okay, I'm going to test, let's say, test 2 dulu lah. We want to test first kan. Okay, so key name for student 1. Student 2. Okay, it ends. Oh, nice. Let's forgot the space. Okay. To test this, so far no error. We want to test whether we key in betul ke tak. So we copy this for loop, which is for display. Ini saya tunjuk paling basic untuk array. So I'm going to do this back again. You can either use I or change this, but yeah, I'm just going to change, remain the same because it's resetting back. So shouldn't be a problem. So this I'm going to change the name for student sekian-sekian is this. So I'm going to, I just copy this. Reuse this. Media. I don't need this. Scanf tak perlu dah. So this will go into here. And I'm going to extract the name and put it into here. Okay, so I'm going to look in here, whatever that I've displayed. So let's test. So how many students? Let's test a bit bigger lah, 5. Because it's a dynamic array kan. Okay, for student 1, say student name A, student name B, student name C, student name D, and student name E. So there'll be 5. Then I display A, B, C, D, E. So if I put it in a longer terms, then yeah, it's going to come out longer. So this is the method of doing it in array. So which means contoh like question number 1, this is something you can do for problem 1 and problem 2. If you notice that they didn't mention here, of course they didn't ask you how many number of students can, because it's not meant to be for array. Okay, but to do this, what you can do is that from your, for those who already complete your problem 1 and problem 2, if you notice this is the same, right? So try to change your code to this method, which is you ask how many newborn babies. Contoh for this question, problem 2. How many newborns baby? And then you do the looping. You create an array of the newborn. Sebab on this soalan, you akan buat 2. Newborn 1, newborn 2, which is this and this. So make it to an array and do this. Get the input from the user. Sama je macam tadi saya bagi jawapan tu. You just cut everything, copy, you throw it inside the for loop. Okay, the only thing that you have to change is just this. You are just playing with array. So here you'll be able to create multiple inputs, and then later you display pun, you just make a looping. So that lets you to dynamically create records. That is why we use array lah. So this is like a template, and this is the copies of the record. All right. So yep, try to modify those questions, problem 1, problem 2, and try it out. You don't have to submit it, but just try it out for yourself and see if this array method works. Because this will make your life easier when you're dealing with multiple records or data. Okay. So that's all for the lecture session today.